Hey everyone, Badger here, and today we'll continue to show you why the official HD port, or so-called remaster, of San Andreas on the consoles is a disaster and a huge disappointment. Previously, we found out that the remaster on the Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PlayStation 3 has tons of bugs, which gives off the impression that the developers had zero care for the quality of their product. Also, thanks to the backwards compatibility program on Xbox, you can now enjoy this broken version of the game on your Series S and Series X. We also looked at some of the strange enhancements and apparent improvements that people didn't even like, because really, how can you enjoy them if they seem to be either broken or mostly unnecessary? But today, for part 2, we'll be looking at some of the more serious issues that are in this version of the game. You better be prepared to be shocked yet again, because you will see more examples of how the developers of GTA San Andreas Remastered ruined multiple game mechanics, making some of them way too simplified, as well as getting rid of various interesting small features and details that were present in the original game. And don't be fooled by the so-called enhanced graphics either. Despite looking halfway decent, sometimes it manages to be 2 steps behind the original PS2 version from 2004. Some of you may already know why there are so many problems in this version, but for those who don't know, then you can blame the stupid decision that somebody made when they decided to take the mobile port of the game and release it on consoles without changing much in the game's core. Don't believe me? Well, then let's activate the so-called secret show mappings cheat that I showed you in my older video. By activating this debug cheat, you will immediately notice the familiar button icons from the mobile port, and these aren't just static icons that will appear on your TV or monitor. If you press a certain button on the gamepad, the relevant icon will light up, showing that you successfully activated it as if you had pressed it on a touchscreen device. Perhaps the developers used this function to emulate touch controls on a gamepad or vice versa, but either way it looks very odd. You know what's even funnier? These icons still exist in the remaster. One asks you to choose a touch layout, with the second one asking you to select a steering method mentioning thumbs. Of course, these widgets are unused and remain hidden, but the fact that they're still present in the code once again proves one very important thing. The console re-release, the remaster if you will, is nothing more than just a slightly modified mobile version of the game. Now you're going to find out why some of the game mechanics in this version are simplified and, for the most part, just as broken as they are in the mobile port of the game. Perhaps the best example is the broken bike controls. In the original version, by holding the acceleration button, CJ will cycle at a regular speed, but as soon as you start tapping it, he'll speed up and his cycling animation will show him cycling faster. Unfortunately, in the remaster, this mechanic has been simplified. No matter how you press the button, the game will always activate the more advanced cycling technique, the faster one, leaving you with no way to cycle at a regular speed. That disappointed a lot of people in the first few minutes of trying this version of the game. Now, if you think that's dumb, do you know what's even dumber? The acceleration button in the remaster is by default set on the right analog trigger. However, the game doesn't even track the pressure that you're making when you click down on it. What could have easily been used to adjust the speed of the bike was simply ignored by the developers. And this issue originated with the mobile port, where the cycling mechanic wasn't really a good fit for touchscreens, because otherwise the user would just be endlessly tapping their finger on their cell phone. Unfortunately, the developers had no better idea than to make the acceleration button activate the full speed of the bike without reverting this change back to the way it originally was for the console re-release. This small example perfectly shows you the quality of this product. Thanks to the mobile version of the game, the remastered version has this so-called auto-climb feature, which happens when you're holding the sprint button. Now, there's no doubt that it might be convenient if you're playing on a cell phone, but what was the point of leaving this in on the console version? A lot of people just end up climbing up something that they didn't really want to, and then they gotta jump back down again. It's also really annoying seeing Carl constantly bumping his head into an obstacle because for some reason he wants to climb up somewhere that he can't, and it really slows you down. Thankfully, you can disable this stupid option in the menu, although you won't be able to do that in the digital copy on the Xbox 360. The revamped fighting system looks kinda weird on consoles too. Now, all you need to do to really fight is just hold the attack button down and CJ will beat his opponent until you release it. In the original version of the game, one press of the button equals one hit, so if you want to win the battle, then you need to mash the attack button. This allows you to take full control in the fight and genuinely enjoy the process at the same time. The same thing happens now while using special attacks. I don't know about you, but in my opinion, it's not very fun just holding one button down and then watching the fight. Of course, if you're playing this game on a cell phone or a tablet, then yeah, it was the right solution, but on consoles it's worthless. Even the ability to pick up stolen goods during the burglary side mission suffered from this issue. In the original version, if you wanted to pick up a certain item, all you had to do was stand next to it and press the correct button. This will give Carl a command to pick it up. It's as simple as that. But it looks like the developers thought that would be too difficult in the mobile version and decided to automate it. As a result, in the remaster on the consoles, as soon as Carl gets close to an item, he will automatically go closer to it and pick it up, even if you didn't really want to steal it. Do you think the developers fully tested this change after implementing it? Of course not. First of all, it's now very hard to put the item that you just picked up back down. If you put it down again, Carl might just pick it up again. And you could try putting it down again, but Carl's just too stubborn, he'll pick it up again until you get lucky enough to move to the right spot so that he won't even touch it anymore. Yeah, it's pretty frustrating. Oh, and another thing, always try to reach for the item when you're actually facing it, because otherwise there is a pretty big chance that CJ will attempt to pick it up through an obstacle, and he'll just end up getting stuck in a random piece of furniture. Now, the first few seconds after this happens, you might think it looks funny, until you realize there's no way you can cancel this action. At the same time, while Carl is trying to do the impossible, the noise meter keeps rising up, and soon enough the NPC inside will be alerted. You can clearly see that I am pressing all of the buttons I can, but it does not help me much. If you got stuck like I did, then don't even think about canceling the mission. Otherwise, you're gonna get stuck here forever unless something interrupts Carl like on this footage. I guess in this case, I was lucky enough to avoid having to reload the save. As stupid as this sounds, the best possible solution in this situation is to wait until the timer runs out, and then you'll be teleported outside of the house. Of course, you will fail the mission and get the cops on your tail, but trust me, it's better than having to reload a save. Also, for some very strange reason, as soon as you exit the Boxville, the doors will open up by themselves, and when you re-enter it, they'll close, which never happens in the original game. Funny enough, even this simple new feature was done very poorly, because every single time you exit the van, you'll hear this buggy sound from behind now. You know, it kinda sounds like a drum roll, except nothing exciting happens. And that is how the developers ruined this interesting pastime that we all enjoyed in the original release. Other game mechanics, such as exercising at the gym, have also gotten worse in the remaster. First, let's take a look at weightlifting. In the original version of the game, in order to gain more muscle, you need to quickly alternate between pressing two buttons. If you do it the right way, the power bar will fill up, and over time, CJ will become more and more muscular. The more muscular you are, the easier it will be for CJ to lift heavier weights. Sadly though, in the remaster, this mechanic is yet another one that has been simplified, and the game now asks you to press only one button instead of alternating between two. I think you'll agree that this kind of change makes this minigame much more casual and boring. And hey, have you noticed that there's no power bar on the screen anymore? So now you're lifting weights blindly. Cool, huh? But hold tight because there's some other crazy stuff happening in this new version. Pay attention to how Carl has absolutely zero muscle right now. He is 100% skinny. It seems that the developers had screwed up the code somehow and introduced this new bug where skinny Carl can easily lift the heaviest weight in the gym with no effort. Isn't this just amazing? What was the point of trying to lift heavier weights as time goes on if now you can just skip that step and mash one button to reach your goal? Of course, there is no such nonsense present in the original game. The game knows when you're allowed to lift heavier weights in the gym. No matter how hard you try to mash the buttons in the original version, you will not be able to cheat the system. But what about the treadmill and bike exercises, you might be asking? Well, there's nothing extraordinary about them, besides the fact that they have no power bar again. So once again, you have absolutely no idea how you're doing during the exercise. Of course, these downgrades to the gym on console make no sense, but if you look at the mobile port, then things might become a little more clear. If you didn't know, all of the exercises in the Android and iOS version of the game became lame minigames. For example, when you're weightlifting, all you have to do is tap the button at the right time to register a successful rep. When you do running exercises, you have to move your finger in a circle to gain speed, which you can do very calmly. This is why there's no power bar on the screen anymore. It simply became useless, at least on mobile. Funny thing is, the lifting minigame is a buggy and unfinished mess. You can totally ignore the moving bar and tap the button randomly, and the game will still usually register the rep anyway. Not to mention the fact that you can be really skinny and still lift heavy weights from the beginning. As you can see, for mobile devices, they successfully broke the gym, and that's why all of these flaws reappeared in the remaster by default. Now tell me something, do you like it when the developers pull pranks on you in their game? Probably not, especially not when you're flying on a jetpack somewhere in the sky at a very high altitude. Not many people know about this, but in the newer version, if you press the exit vehicle button, CJ will take his jetpack off in midair before slamming into the ground a short time later. Without any doubt, this new feature is very stupid, but for some reason they left the exit vehicle button on the screen in the mobile version of the game. Why would they do that? Because they hate you, that's why. Nah, I'm just kidding. Maybe they just forgot to disable the button when you're not touching the ground anymore. There are some other really weird changes too. For instance, in the remaster, CJ does not immediately jump when you press the corresponding button. He only does it when you actually release the button. It doesn't feel right, and it never worked like this in the original version. In the mobile port, Carl jumps by double tapping the sprint widget. Maybe this is why this function doesn't work properly on a gamepad. I noticed that the same thing happens with the enter and exit vehicle button too. If the previous change that we talked about introduced a stupid delay that happens before jumping, then this change messes with how you get out of a car. In the original version, if you press and hold the exit button while you're driving fast enough, Carl will bail out of the vehicle, an action that could very well save his life. In the remaster, Carl immediately hits the brakes and lets it slow down to a complete stop, just like if you were to slow down while driving in the original without trying to jump out. If the player is not aware of this change, then in some cases it might ruin their current playthrough, like on this footage. Sadly, this is how the enter and exit widget works in the mobile port of the game, and once again, I have no explanation for why it does this. And finally, the same issue happens while hitting the attack button too, but only when you're using a scope. It happens when you're shooting with a sniper rifle, and also while you're firing RPGs. Or even if you're just taking pictures with an ordinary camera. I'll repeat again, it shouldn't be like that. Since we're talking about weapons, I think it's worth mentioning that the rifle has no unique aiming mechanic anymore. Instead, it goes into a first-person view like you see in some story missions. Another sad change that the developers made were changes to some industrial vehicle controls. In the original version, things such as the bed of the dumper, the forks on the forklift, the towing hook on the tow truck, and a few more things on vehicles could be manually adjusted by moving the right analog stick. It was always a nice little detail of the game. Unfortunately, in the enhanced version, these controls have been dumbed down. Now you can only choose between two opposite states, minimum or maximum. You can't adjust the height or angle like you could in the original version, all thanks to touchscreen adaptation. I'm not sure if anyone cares about this, but the strength that Carl hits the cue ball in the pool minigame with now depends on the moment that you press the button and not on how fast you move the right analog stick. As a result, they made this minigame now much less flexible and much more casual than it was before. If you're not pressing any button, then Carl will be stuck in this loop ready to strike the ball and rubbing the cue against his hand forever. Well, that looks awkward, don't you think? By the way, how do you like the new feature where after respawning at the hospital, you don't lose your weapons anymore? Yeah, that's right. Starting from the mobile version of the game, you don't have to be afraid of losing your weapons after dying anymore. You can basically go berserk straight after you're discharged from the hospital over and over again, until you get busted by the cops and they take your weapons away, or until you just run out of bullets. Of course, this makes things much easier, but don't forget that this change also makes one of the main rewards for having a relationship with Katie pretty much redundant, since now the game basically does the same thing from the start. Do you remember how cool it was to find a camera and take some random shots to look through later in a photo gallery? I'm sure we all showed our friends some really weird photos that we took in the game. Sadly, you can now forget about this cool feature in the remaster. In this new version, the camera is only needed now to complete the snapshots in San Fierro and to progress further in a few missions. Other than that, it became pretty much useless because there's no photo gallery. The game doesn't save your photos anymore, which is quite sad. The next thing they managed to screw up with the camera is its zooming ability. As you can see, it isn't hard to notice that in the original version, the camera has a much more powerful zoom compared to the remaster, but it still takes the same amount of time to zoom in and out. Thanks to that, zooming in the new version feels very slow, and for the most part, it doesn't help you much, but at least they corrected the aspect ratio of the overlay texture. Thanks for that, I guess. But what about the sniper rifle? Well, if my eyes aren't deceiving me, then I see no difference in zooming in or out. So that's that, they just screwed up something in the camera somehow. Let's be honest, didn't you just hate seeing this annoying pop-up telling you that your turf is being attacked by a rival gang? And you know what, for some very weird reason, the developers decided that it would be a great idea to disable the wanted level during a turf war in their version. Thanks to that, if you're in the middle of a battle with the police, then as soon as your turf is under attack, the cops will immediately lose interest in chasing you down. They'll just vanish from the crime scene as soon as possible. They basically forget about your crimes while you're being told to protect your territory. Come on. To remind you, there was no such thing in the original version of the game. When your turf is attacked, you'll still get a wanted level if you commit crimes. But when you enter the turf war, the wanted level sort of freezes. New cops stop spawning until you take over the territory. This, of course, is still better than a sudden disappearance of the wanted level. On the other hand, there's now a cool new trick that you can use because of this change. If you have the police on your tail and you're too lazy to drive all the way to a pay and spray, simply trigger a turf war and the cops will leave you alone. And if you don't want to take over the territory, then just like in the original version of the game, all you gotta do is enter any taxi or emergency vehicle and toggle the sub mission, and then the turf war will be cancelled. And that's it. No cops and no turf war in less than a minute. You can use that if you want to. I think you know about toggling a secondary siren by holding down the horn button while you're driving an emergency vehicle. But you can forget about doing that in the remaster because instead of looping, the sirens turn off. On the other hand, there's no such problem with the horn. Of course, it's another stupid bug that they introduced in the mobile version of the game, and since day one of its release, it has not been fixed. Now, what about the hidden details? Not many people know about this, but you can turn on the searchlight in a police maverick by pressing the horn button like this. Of course, it's pretty pointless, but it's still another cool little detail in the game. Yet again, you can no longer do this in the enhanced version because when you press the correct button, the searchlight won't light up even after pressing other buttons too. But if for some reason you really wanted to fly the police chopper with a searchlight, then your only option is to steal a police maverick at night by using this trick. But why should it be so complicated to do this? You should be able to do this just by pressing a button. They also changed the way that you swim in this game. For some odd reason, the developers reversed the diving controls. In the original game, when you push the left analog stick forward, Carl dives into the water. But in the remaster, instead he emerges from the water when you push forward. For such a minor change, it made a lot of players complain about CJ constantly coming up to the surface. I'm not kidding either, people were saying it's impossible to dive into the water in this version because of this change. Despite the fact that that's not true, you can't blame these people for saying that because in the remaster, after jumping from a certain height, CJ won't go beneath the surface of the water anymore like he would in the original game. But this doesn't happen consistently either. Under some circumstances, CJ can dive in a bit, which means that this mechanic is probably broken too. It feels to me like the game doesn't properly calculate the falling speed anymore, but that's just a theory. Now, I want you to pay close attention to the Hydra controls. I'm sure a lot of you know that they completely revamped, or let's just say ruined, this jet's controls for touchscreens. The problem is they became automatic. In order to retract the landing gear, you don't need to press a certain widget anymore. Instead, you have to go to the right altitude by pushing the acceleration button long enough. In order to fly forward, you have to tilt your plane forward, and only then will the game change the thruster's angle. Those of you who have played this on a mobile platform know the pain of controlling this jet, knowing that this amazing system doesn't really work as intended. You can really waste a lot of time when you're just trying to get from point A to point B. But you know what? The developers actually restored the original mechanic for the Hydra in the console version, meaning that you can now freely take over the landing gear whenever you want. Not to mention you can also change the thruster angle with the right analog stick when you want to. No more stupid automation. Now there's something that's almost like the original version of the game. Do you realize now that the developers could have easily restored many other original mechanics in their console version, instead of leaving them as is? Unfortunately, they did not do this, and now the players are left to suffer with these broken mechanics. Now, as nice as it was that they restored the Hydra's landing gear and thruster controls, they didn't restore the missile lock-on mechanic. If you're flying above ground with a lot of cars around, the Hydra will always keep locking onto them, even if you have no intent to attack. As a result, you will constantly see this green and red sight appearing and disappearing on your screen like crazy. Do you know what's more sad? Yet again, they introduced a completely new bug by making this change. If you exit the jet while you have the sight on your screen, then it won't disappear. In fact, you can even approach it and take a closer look. Fortunately, it will disappear eventually. Do you know why this bug could happen? In the original version of the game, the lock-on mode only works when you're pressing a certain button. While you're in this special mode, you can't exit the jet. You see, there are some limitations and conditions in this feature, but due to laziness in the way that they implemented it, we have an annoying new bug as a result. So what is it that we hate about this new version of San Andreas that we hate the most? The various downgrades, of course. So now let's talk about what this version does not have in comparison to the original release. We can assume that the developers got rid of the vegetation in the mobile port to better optimize the game for mobile devices, but why would they leave it like this for the console version too? Places that were once full of bushes, trees, and grass now look very empty, barren, and boring. Tell me something, would you rather walk through the dense foliage in the original, or walk through the same area in the remaster just to see how depressing and flat this place has become? Do you think that only the forests are suffering from this kind of emptiness? Well then take a look at the desert in Las Venturas. There is absolutely nothing here anymore. No more dead bushes, no cacti, nothing apart from the sandy environment is left here. And look at the fields too, they're as empty as the other places in the remaster. Also, you notice how the crops and grass could sway in the wind, wasn't that cool? So yeah, no matter where you are, this area will be empty and quite disappointing. But there's something else that might disappoint you more. They also got rid of the various props and objects around the map too, such as the rocks. And they also got rid of the small trees which you could run over in the fields or blow up with a satchel charge. Don't you think that was always a cool thing to mess around with? If you don't remember, some of the rocks were breakable too, so yeah, I think you might agree that this downgrade is one of the more disappointing things in the enhanced version. Now, until this very moment, we've been comparing the enhanced version with the PS2 version. But don't forget that the PC version and the original Xbox version came out later than the PS2 version as well. And not only do these versions also have less plant density around the map, but the textures and general appearance are also slightly different. But no matter what, the vegetation is still there, and you can still enjoy it apart from the other little cut details that I'll show you in a moment. For instance, in the original version, if you don't interact with the game for some time, it will enable the idle camera, which will zoom around and show you what's going on in your immediate surroundings. In the remaster, sadly, this is no longer a thing. I think you remember these pesky drivers that will ram your car if you crash into them, which always looked a bit weird. People call them aggressive drivers, and unfortunately, they disappeared from the enhanced version too. But the truth is, this feature was always exclusive to the PC version, and I wonder if it was a cut feature that somehow ended up being enabled in this version. On top of that, when you're swimming underwater, you won't see the screen distortion effect anymore. It simply vanished in the remaster, and thanks to that, you can't even tell if you're in a different environment apart from seeing the bubbles coming out of Carl. Well, thanks for leaving that at least. Of course, one could argue that this effect looks way better on PS2 than on PC, but we're talking about its presence and not how good it looks on various platforms. Another awful thing that people noticed is the absence of a blurry screen while driving at high speeds. To remind you, the faster you drive, the blurrier your screen becomes, but as you can see, nothing changes in the remaster. And if they sacrificed that, then don't expect that your screen will change after activating Nitro either. I don't know about you, but to me it's like it completely loses the wow factor. Remember the heat haze effect that you'd see during a hot sunny day in San Andreas? Well, once again, this is something that you won't experience in the new version, although I'm sure that lots of people already hated it anyway. But what about the heat effect around the fire? Well, that's gone too. Doesn't it make the fire look more natural and dangerous? You decide. And now take a look at the Hydra's thrusters. Once again, there is no heat effect coming from here. Of course, the jetpack has the same issue too, and I really doubt that most people would be happy with these downgrades and details. Another disappointing thing in the enhanced version is the lack of big clouds in the sky. And while you're watching the emptiness, just look at how cool the heat effect looks on the Hydra thrusters. The more we look, the more disappointing things become. But do you know what's worse? The foggy weather with absolutely no fog. Look at this. Am I really supposed to believe that a dimmed picture with a low draw distance is supposed to be foggy weather now? Come on. What about the rainy weather? Well, now there's no noise effect during the heavy rainfall, but hey, at least we still see raindrops. To be honest, I wouldn't have been surprised if they ended up getting cut too. Say goodbye to the grain effect while using the night vision goggles in the remaster as well. Just tell me, what do you think looks better? A simple green filter on your screen, or what you see in the original version? But what about the thermal goggles? To the surprise of no one, they look way better and more natural in the PS2 version. But if we compare them with the PC and Xbox versions, then we can see that there's no grain effect either, which is disappointing. Now let's continue to talk about the so-called upgrades. This time we can focus on the mysterious improved car models. When the mobile version was announced, Rockstar told us that not only would characters receive enhanced models, but so would cars. And thanks to the first part of this video series, we know what these enhanced character models look like. They called these broken and ugly models by Wardrum Studios an improvement. But what about the cars? To this day, players are still trying to figure out what was actually improved in the car models. It's pretty hard to figure out, especially since after that announcement, Rockstar never mentioned it again. Could the enhancement be this new broken windshield texture? I mean, I guess it counts as an enhancement, but it's not exactly a noteworthy change. Not to mention it has nothing to do with the model itself. Okay, can we count the missing part of the cheetah's grill as an enhancement? All jokes aside, this bug has been around since the release of the mobile port, and like with many other bugs in that version, it's as if they don't care about fixing it. But don't think that this only happens to the cheetah, because the headlights on the Phoenix are missing some parts to them too, and because of this, you can now see the road surface through the car. Something similar happened with the Yankee. You will definitely notice that there is something wrong with its right headlight, and once again, you can look right through it. Have you seen the Dozer in this new version? It's got a lot of holes in it now, and a Swiss cheese effect going on with it. You can always speculate that these holes were there for a reason. For instance, maybe the ability to look through it is the enhancement. Or not, it's just another really stupid bug with the model. Do you know what looks even more stupid? The dumper's bed, which has so many openings in it now that I'm not quite sure if that's useful as a construction vehicle. As you can see, the situation with the vehicle models is quite sad. I have to wonder, how did the developers not notice this when they were working on the game? The glitchy models aren't exactly hidden or in a spot where they might have missed it because it was hard to notice. The issues are quite visible, and I highly doubt that they would have missed them. But do you know what's funny? We actually know the cause of these issues. Apparently, the developers enabled backface culling on vehicles to squeeze the performance out on mobile platforms. However, for some reason, for some polygons, they used front-face culling instead of back-face culling, and it made holes in the models. In other words, these polygons render, but from another side. We won't talk about why they used a wrong culling set, but what was the point of leaving this hack in the console versions in the first place? I guess they never bothered to disable it. Even stranger is how the game now refuses to render the Rhino's 6th pair of wheels. I mean, really, what is this supposed to be? But what I do know is that this specific bug is related to the new vehicle reflection system. How do I know that? Well, by choosing any other car reflection quality in the mobile version apart from maximum quality, it actually fixes the problem. As you can see, it doesn't fix the missing polygons, but the nice thing is that we know now why this happens on consoles too, because on those platforms, the reflections are maxed out by default. Speaking of wheels, don't you hate this new bug present on the bike wheels? To me, it looks like there's something wrong with the texture wrapping or edge smoothing, and because it's on the back of the wheel, it's way too noticeable and you will always see it when you're driving a bike. So what do we have in the end? Despite the fact that this version apparently has some mysterious car model enhancements, I didn't find them. Instead, I just found more annoying bugs that were never there in the original game. Of course, all of the old bugs that have been there since the PS2 version are still present. And you know, I am still very curious to know what they really meant by saying this in that announcement. It can't just be the stupid new broken glass texture. No, I refuse to believe that. Now let's talk about another enhancement in this new version, which we know as an improved shadow system. But trust me, it's not as good as you might have thought. If you don't know the full details, you might say that these new shadows look amazing, and to be honest, it's hard to argue with that, because they're rendered in real time and they look very solid. However, if we look deeper at the shadow system, then you'll definitely see some distinct flaws in it. First of all, dynamic shadows in the enhanced version are rendered only by pedestrians, vehicles, and CJ. But for some weird reason, secondary props such as lampposts and boxes have these outdated PS2 shadows. One has a pre-rendered shadow, the second has a typical blurry stain on the ground. And objects like trees and telephone poles won't even cast a shadow at all. And you know what? The PS2 version had the exact same thing. In this regard, I think the shadows in the PC and Xbox versions look the most detailed out of any version. They're rendered by almost everything we discussed before, including lampposts, wires, vehicles, CJ, trees, and many other props had received dynamic shadows. But let's keep looking at the remaster. In the remaster, while CJ is in an interior, he doesn't cast a dynamic shadow anymore, but for some reason NPCs do, which is kinda strange. And hey, have you noticed how there are no more fake or pre-rendered shadows here? Thanks to that, the interiors in the new version look unnatural, very bright, and quite cheap. However, other interiors, such as the gym in Los Santos, still have them, but as you can see, it doesn't help much as the lighting on NPCs is screwed, while on Carl, it's not. We'll talk about this some other time. If you ask me, I think the absence of fake shadows is a very nasty downgrade, because it basically leads to a worse experience while you're watching your favorite cutscenes. Just look at how bright and unnatural the interior of Sweet's home is now. The only thing still casting a shadow in here is the ceiling fan. Of course, using fake shadows in a video game is a dirty trick, especially when it's just a simple dark texture overlay, but doesn't the interior look better with them? What was even their reason for getting rid of them to begin with? Kinda wish I knew. You know what else is strange? In the new version, aircraft won't cast shadows at all now, but did you know you could still turn them on? Just enter the cockpit and there you go. The game will suddenly enable a blurry spot that's supposed to be a shadow, but it'll disappear as soon as you exit the aircraft. Kind of a cheap implementation, huh? However, on some occasions, the shadow is visible. Sometimes it disappears after you move the camera. To be honest, I have no idea how these aircraft shadows really work. It might be hard to believe, but it wasn't so bad in the PS2 version. You always had the blurry shadow at least, which was rendered all the time. So I wonder if this is yet another flaw in the code for the remaster. But the winners here obviously are the PC and Xbox versions with their dynamic shadows. This is what we should have had in the remaster to begin with, but with better implementation. Don't you agree? Do you know what's better in the remaster? Well, now all weapons cast shadows in this game. And yes, I know they're too blurry and messy on Xbox and PC to see them, but trust me, the weapons in these versions do not cast shadows at all. However, there is one tiny flaw in this advantage. If CJ is wielding two guns at once, the second gun won't ever cast a shadow, and it'll look like you're shooting from your fingers. Something similar happens when you're holding stolen property during the burglary side mission. On PC and Xbox, you can definitely see no goods in Carl's hands in the shadow. Meanwhile, in the remaster, you can see the freaking gun there, but not the stereo. But at least the jetpack casts a shadow now too. Thanks to its large size, you can easily see it on this comparison without having to imagine that it's there. As you can see, for the most part, these improved dynamic shadows are mostly based on the PC and Xbox shadows, as they share some distinct similarities, but at the same time, there are some differences. I'm not sure if this happens on PC or Xbox, but sometimes Carl's shadow might disappear while you're riding a bike or a motorcycle. Thankfully, eventually the shadow will magically reappear, but I still don't understand what causes the issue. But the most annoying thing that you will experience is the double shadow issue. You might already know that in a few places on PC, the game will render an additional dynamic shadow where it doesn't belong. Well, in the remaster, you'll see them a lot better, not to mention there are more places where they appear for no apparent reason. For instance, let's take a look at this place. There's no issue here on PC or Xbox, but in the enhanced version you'll see a double shadow. Trust me, the weather and the time are both the same on both pieces of footage. And hey, sometimes these double shadows can actually scare you too. When I first saw this on the wall, I was like, what? These are just ballas trying to kill me. I guess it only happens for those models which have a special flag to reflect the shadow, and for some reason the consequences are more frustrating than before. As a result, the new shadow system in the enhanced version is just a slightly upgraded version of the PC and Xbox mechanic, with the outdated PS2 code. Can we say that the shadow mechanic overall is much better than on PC or PS2? Well, definitely not, but the new dynamic stencil shadows are indeed impressive. I guess I just wish it was more polished. Do you know what causes more pain in these lousy downgrades? The stupid in-game camera, the core of which was completely remade for the touch controls. Perhaps the main problem with the camera is the sensitivity. It's hard to explain in words, but in the original release, the camera used to be way more responsive and smooth. I'll try to prove that. When you're pushing the analog stick just slightly, the camera in the remaster moves way too fast, while in the original game it moves very slowly, as it logically should. When you're pushing the stick slightly more, the camera in the remaster moves even faster, while in the original version it moves just as you would expect. Still not fast, but not as slow as before. And finally, when you're pushing the stick all the way, the camera in the remaster will rotate way too fast, even faster than it would in the original if you did this. Do you think you can fix it by changing the sensitivity in the options? Nope, because for the most part, these settings are broken. If you lower the sensitivity, the camera will move like a turtle. It'll take ages to rotate and it's not usable at all. But when you set the sensitivity higher, the camera will spin like crazy, also not usable. I didn't say the exact numbers I chose in the settings on purpose. These weren't even the lowest or highest values. They were somewhere in the middle. It will take you some time to find your desired sensitivity, but it still won't be the same as it was in the original version of the game. But when you do find the right settings, be prepared to suffer through another issue yet again, because different camera modes in this version don't all have the same sensitivity. For instance, by setting sensitivity to 38%, the third-person camera moves like this, which is acceptable, I guess. But this is how it works for the first-person camera in some story missions. It moves too freaking slow, and it takes ages to aim in the right direction. Yes, that's right, you will have to open the stupid settings in the middle of the mission and set the sensitivity to something else, like let's say 80%. Only then will you get around the same result as you had on foot, but don't forget to revert this change after completing the mission, because these settings become difficult to play with. Is it convenient to keep on doing this? Of course not. But there are even worse camera changes. Thanks to the Android and iOS versions, the camera angle in the aircraft is fixed now, meaning that it is fully static and it doesn't move up or down when you're taking off or landing. It also means that there's no ability to rotate the camera anymore. When you're piloting an aircraft in the remaster, the right analog stick does absolutely nothing. Without a doubt, this downgrade really complicates things, because when you're flying, you'll always want to see what's going around you, but now you can't because the developers decided to prohibit you from doing so. As a result, some of the story missions become more frustrating than before, especially missions where you might have already had problems in the original. But in the end, you'll still be able to pass them all. It'll just take time, luck, and some trial and error, I guess. Another thing from the mobile version, the developers completely changed how you activate various camera modes in vehicles. And I won't lie, using touch gestures like pinching to zoom in and out is a good thing to implement on a touchscreen. It makes sense. But these camera modes appeared in the console version too, and it would be fine if the developers didn't forget about bringing back the cinematic camera mode after getting rid of it for Android and iOS devices. Yes, that's right, you can no longer activate the cinematic camera anymore. You know, it's only been present in every game since GTA 3, and it's been loved by many. On the other hand, you can still experience this camera mode while you're driving a train, or while you're traveling between cities via the airlines, and maybe somewhere else where it was the default camera mode. We also shouldn't forget about the useful little details with the camera. In the original game, by using the left analog stick, you can not only steer the car left or right, but you can also move the camera up and down with it. Unfortunately, moving the camera with the left analog stick is something that the remaster is missing. And as some of you may remember, this feature was useful on some occasions, especially when you're driving a lowrider or doing something else where you might need it. And when CJ is swimming, the camera in the original version always used to bounce back a bit when you released the thumbstick. And once again, there's no such thing in the remaster. Also in the original version, when you spin the camera around, you'll feel some sort of resistance from the camera, and it'll take some time to spin it around. I think you can already guess that this has been removed starting with the release of the mobile version for better usage of touch controls. If you were wondering, both features are absent on PC if you use a mouse. In this version, the camera follows the direction of the mouse. While I am still very proud about the first part of this video series, a few things should still be corrected and explained, because some of the corrections and additions are actually astonishing, and I have no problem admitting my flaws. For instance, we finally have an answer as to why all the character models are broken in this version. As stupid as this sounds, while porting the game to another renderer, the developers introduced a bug in storing skin weights. Instead of a 2-byte value, for some reason they used a 1-byte value. This ended up breaking vertex elasticity and they became overstretched. This was found by The Flow, the author of an unofficial PS Vita port, and ifarbod patched this problem in his unofficial fixed mobile port release. You see, this whole time it was just a stupid bug in the code and not a problem with the models like we thought before. But no matter what, the developers still never bothered to fix it, and it's a pretty easy bug to squash. I wonder if they just didn't know what the problem was and simply ignored it. Previously, I told you that in the remaster, as soon as you rotate the camera, the clouds will teleport here and there. Well, while the bug is 100% real, it's not present only in the original version on PC and on Xbox, but in the PS2 version, it's there. This is something I missed while preparing the first part, and to be honest, I have no idea why it reappeared in the enhanced version after it was already fixed on PC and Xbox. I also showed you this mysterious barrier in the desert, which for some reason has a strange bug that lets you see right through it to the cars passing by behind it. The thing is, you can find this bug in the original Xbox and PC versions too, but then not on the PS2. It looks like Rockstar screwed this model up since it was on PC and Xbox. It wasn't Wardrum Studios' fault at all, apart from not fixing it. And there are quite a few similar problematic models all around the map, but once again they were screwed in the PS2 release by Rockstar themselves, not Wardrum. Previously, we found out that you swim slower and lose strength faster in the remaster, and this is still true. But what I want to point out is the fact that some people said that this bug occurs because the remaster has a higher frame rate, and that you can experience a similar bug on PC when you turn off the frame limiter. The thing is, the remaster plays at 30 frames per second, yet you're still going to experience the same bug as if the frame rate was higher. I think we should just accept that swimming in the remaster is broken. Also, remember how I showed you that sometimes the radar on the map and the menu won't always fully load and it'll look like a mess? Turns out that it happens because of the higher quality map textures. Some people managed to fix this bug by simply using the original low resolution textures. Wardrum Studios just didn't properly increase the streaming in this place, and the game sometimes bugs out from these high quality textures. Remember when I said that you shouldn't drive too fast in the countryside, because if you do, then you'll see these strange graphical corruptions in the left and right corners? Well, it turns out that this is an original Rockstar bug on all platforms involving the widescreen resolution. I didn't notice it because I didn't use a widescreen option while testing both versions, so that's also not Wardrum's bug. But the rest of it is pretty much solid and I have nothing else to add. And that's the end of part 2. You might be amazed to hear this, but I've still got stuff to talk about with this remaster, so yes, there will be a third part to this series. If you have some things to mention about this version, make sure you write it down in the comments below. Maybe there are still some things that I'm not aware of yet. For more videos on GTA, Rockstar, and occasionally gaming in general, check out my channel here on YouTube at BadgerGoodger. And Vadim and I are both on Twitter as well, so go follow us there too. Anyway, this has been Badger, and I hope everyone has a great day out there. Peace out, everyone.